So, hi everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this conversation with Andy Halsall, who's the founder and CEO of a company called Poor Internet. Poor Internet has been providing affordable internet services to Kenyans in certain areas of the country. And, in the last week, we've seen some very interesting news and developments about the company. And I think, first of all, I'd just like to thank Andy for joining us. Thanks, Andy, for joining us for this conversation.
Thanks, Moses. Nice to be here.
So, Andy, I'd just like to know, for those who are listening, those who are going to be watching this content, I'd just like to get a sense of, yourself, who you are from a personal and professional perspective, and how you got here, basically starting up this business, which, is doing some amazing things in terms of providing internet access to the underserved market.
Sure. So I'm, as you can probably tell by my accent, I'm British. I was born in the UK in 1973, which means I'm fortunately a little older than I would like. But I kind of grew up as home computers were starting to become a thing in Europe. And I kind of got hooked on technology by there was a computer in our school. There was one computer in the school for the whole school to use, and I kind of got hooked on using the computer and kind of got into programming, and that led me into doing a degree in computer science, and then getting even more hooked on telecoms. Because when I was graduating, mobile phones were just starting to appear in Europe, and it seemed like a very interesting thing to do. In fact, the company that I joined straight out of university basically sold me on the idea of working for them, because they didn't have any business in the UK, so they basically mixed two things. I got to do telecoms and computing, but they said I would have to travel abroad. So I got to travel around Europe on somebody else's dime, basically building some of the first mobile phone networks in Europe. So many of these eventually became what's now Vodafone in Europe, but this was back in the Wild West, when people were thinking that mobile phones, maybe 5,000 people in a country would use a mobile phone. And of course, history teaches us it kind of went a bit kind of crazy, and so I just sort of got involved in this crazy time of building these mobile phone networks and building these mobile phone businesses in the sort of mid to late 90s. I then picked up an MBA. I did some work with a consulting firm, and then kind of got involved with investing in telecom businesses. I kind of ended up on the investor side of things, and then tried to start my own investment firm, and that business met some trouble because it was around the time of the dot-com crash. And slowly it became a business that was actually more focused on bringing bringing technology into what then used to be referred to as emerging markets. So we'd find interesting technology from Europe and America, and then try and build a business around it in the Middle East, and actually more in kind of Western Africa, in Eastern Africa. So that's where I got I got to travel, spend some time in some very interesting countries, and I got to also technology and telecoms again. So that then joining a large Wi-Fi, what became a very large Wi-Fi business in Spain. We used to build very large Wi-Fi networks with Deutsche Telekom, Germany, SoftBank. And that led to the genesis of, because I started asking the question, if we took this technology from building in these European and US and Asian countries, that in Latin America or Africa, where clearly there was a problem with getting people internet access. And one thing led to another, and we kind of realized you could change delivering internet, and that is the starting point.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that backstory. So, as I understand it, Poor Internet's been operational now since 2016, so about 6 years now. I believe the areas where you're currently operating is Kibera and Korogosho. These are areas that many Kenyans probably would be surprised to find that a business like Shell operates in. But I'd like to understand a little bit more about, the formation of the business, what you're addressing in that market segment, and how you're able to serve that area, profitably and sustainably. Because we obviously know that the consumers who exist in those markets are not people who are necessarily earning lots of money, but clearly you've seen an opportunity, and that's an area that you're serving.
Yeah, so the starting point was really saying there's these new technologies appearing like Wi-Fi that fundamentally change the cost of building a telecoms network. And by having a lower cost of build, we could, therefore, the intent at the beginning was we thought we'd be able to sell internet access at a far lower price point, because we had to spend less money building the network, and therefore we could just afford to sell it cheaper. And that logic still pervades everything we do today. So we were kind of looking at West Africa in general and Kenya in particular, and realizing we have the very low, obviously this is a few years ago now, but even still today, not many people are using the internet, or not as many people as one would like are using the internet. And it's kind of worse than that. For most people, the experience of using the internet is a few MBs in their bundles. They're very expensive. So those people who can and do get online can't really engage with the richness of the internet. It's hard to stream, it's hard to watch movies, it's hard to do all these things that use a lot of data. So we set ourselves the target of saying, well, there's a big unaddressed market here. Many people can't get online, and those who do can't use a lot of data. So why don't we try and build a telco or an ISP that solves? If not, we're building a telecom business, is you build a network and then you try and sell to the richest guys first. The people with the most money, they're the fattest pickings, so to speak. But we turned around and went, okay, let's start with a big market, because there's a huge number of the internet. We know that. Because anybody, Kenya's a very young population. It's very tech savvy. Everyone wants to get online, but most people can't afford to. So why don't we go after that base and try and come up with a solution to solve internet access for those people? And as soon as you start saying we're going to try and sell to and focus on customers who are on relatively low incomes and can't afford to spend a lot of money on internet, it defines everything. You start thinking through, how do we do this cost effectively? How do we best serve those customers? And how do we serve a product designed for them, rather than building a product for rich folks and then trying to squeeze it down to people who've got less income?
No, absolutely. It's like a famous story I like to share, that there's a time in our home we had a maid who joined us, and after she settled in and she got her stuff in place, the next question she asked is, what's the Wi-Fi password? And I think that's a clear reflection of the market we're in now, where globally internet access has now become a basic human right. And the more people can have access to it, then clearly it sort of transforms their lifestyles and how they live and work and all these things. And I'm just also, again, curious, maybe this is a question is, when you think about, how you're currently deploying your network, and, whether it's, wirelessly and also, specifically on Wi-Fi and so forth, what sort of offerings are you delivering to the target market? I mean, how do you maintain and also secure your infrastructure, given the the socioeconomic status of the people in those areas? And then also, how do you handle the issue of affordable and available electricity to power that internet access? And maybe the last thing is, the literacy aspect, the education. Is it easy for people to get online? Is the capacity there already, or do you also spend a significant amount of time educating the market on how to actually use the internet?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of that's kind of a package. So the infrastructure and delivering this, primarily we offer what's called a fixed wireless access service. So we offer a home internet service. We're not offering a mobile, primarily we're not offering a mobile service. We're offering a service that provides you internet in your home. To the customer, that feels very similar to what you'd be used to as a fiber to the home service. Except we use some different technology to deliver that, and that means we can sell the service far more cost at a far lower price point. So what we offer today is a unlimited data, home residential service for 1,500 shillings a month prepaid, and the amount of minutes they can watch Netflix and YouTube 24/7 without data or using up their bundles. And so that's the core of the kind of service we offer. And we build infrastructure into the communities where we operate to deliver that. So we build towers and masts and so on, but these are quite innocuous things. People are used to seeing these huge kind of cell towers sprouting up around the city. You probably won't spot our towers and masts in our infrastructure. It's tiny, and very lightweight, quite discreet. Most people don't know where it is, and the power required to run it is very low. So we don't need generators and solar cells and huge amounts of infrastructure to kind of keep it running. It's very cost effective to run and doesn't need a lot of energy to keep it going. And again, that saving on energy and the cost of the infrastructure is something we can pass on to our customers to keep the cost as low as we possibly can. Now, you talked about security of the infrastructure. When we were first launching the business, people kept telling us you're going to have huge amounts of theft. Everybody's going to steal the equipment. We had a massive line item in our business plans, for replacing stolen equipment. We have almost no theft. There's a little bit, of course, but far less than we kind of expected. And part of that, I think, is because of the way we build the service. We're deeply integrated with the communities we serve. So most of our team come from the communities where we operate. We provide free internet to the schools in the areas where we operate. And so I think the places where we build these services, I think people understand that we're bringing good to the community. Yes, we're a business, but we're not trying to exploit people, and we're bringing something very valuable to them. So people seem to respect that, and we try to build very strong community relationships and listen to what people are saying and respond to that. So we're trying to do good, and I think people fundamentally believe in that and support us. If you jump back to my backstory, my experience of my first experience of using a computer in the school in the sort of 70s in the UK. By giving free internet into schools here, hopefully we can create the same kind of starter experience. I'd love to hear in 25 or 30 years time somebody, some Kenyan entrepreneur saying, "Well, my first experience of getting on the internet was using power in a school in Kemibaro." That would be an absolute dream. So hopefully we can foster a whole bunch of the next generation of tech-savvy Kenyans through what we're doing. Many of our customers are quite young. Today we operate in kind of Nairobi, and they're pretty tech-savvy. So we haven't had to do a lot of explaining to people what the internet is and how to use it. I think as we expand, as we start heading outside of the capital, as we start looking maybe at more some rural type areas and places where people have had just inherently less experience of the internet, we probably will have to think more about a series of things. People are less likely to have smartphones. People are less likely to have had experience of the internet. They may be more nervous about using technology or unfamiliar with the technology, and so we may have to think about ways to educate them. But I think those problems are more likely to occur as we start heading nationwide than in our base in Nairobi.
Great, thanks so much for that. And then currently, at least as far as what I was able to read, you currently have about 12,000 paying home customers. I believe you're doing that at about 1,500 shillings a month, unlimited, and then tens of thousands of customers on the Wi-Fi networks that you put in play. So I'm just wondering, because clearly, there's great opportunity for I think Point Internet to provide a similar service on a nationwide basis, and I'm just curious to see or hear your thoughts around how you scale that up, how you start to really get this across the entire country.
That's exactly our plan now. So we've spent quite a bit of time working out how to get the service right and deploying in parts of Nairobi and into Kiambu. We're now at the stage where we're going to start deploying this into other places. So over the next couple of years, we would expect to offer this service in many of the towns across Kenya. Certainly, we don't want this to be a Nairobi thing. This is the internet demand is out there nationally, and we certainly want to provide our service to as many people across the country as possible.
Okay. And of course, I think the reason for this call, I think, is recently poor internet had been flying under the radar. That was completely blown out of the water when this announcement came out that you got this massive funding of $28 million. And I think the question that many of us are wondering and looking at is, what does this mean for Point going forward? How do you plan to deploy this investment, and what does it mean for your future prospects?
Well, it's going to support exactly that national growth we just talked about. So we can use that to build our network. We're going to hire a lot more people to support that growth. So we can invest in our we've got a great team, but it's Nairobi based. We're going to have to scale that across the country, and certainly we can use the money to hire more people. We're going to obviously, we have suppliers that many of our suppliers most of our suppliers in fact are local, and so obviously as we build more infrastructure, more towers, and more network, and deploy to more customers, that means we're going to have more and more suppliers that we can support and invest in. So. This money that's come in is going to be used to expand our operations in Kenya and to invest in growing our team and growing our network and suppliers.
Great. And maybe just as a last question, I don't know whether, because it's evident, obviously, this is going to be the journey in the next 2 to 5 years with this, funding that gives you this capacity to now really, significantly grow the business. But are there any, unique predictions that, maybe come to mind in the next 2 to 5 years that you have, maybe at a poor internet level, or just looking at the internet access space within Kenya and the rest of Africa? Are there any things or trends that you're starting to see or can predict going forward?
I mean, certainly, if I look at it from our perspective, our hope is we want to get as many households using as much internet as possible. So I think there will be a shifting away from this mindset that the internet is just about 3G, 4G, and using tiny bundles to this mindset of kind of scarcity. It's a scarce resource that needs to be meted out, to this mindset of plenty and being able to sort of fully engage with the internet. And once that happens, the kind of world is your oyster, so to speak, not from a business perspective, but for the society. The more people that can kind of richly engage with the internet, the more that will drive things like knowledge sector jobs and technology jobs, the more it will help people's education. So many things flow from internet access. So I think if we're even partially successful in our goals, we and others, we're not the only internet provider out there. It's not a power is the only thing in the world, but if we can get a lot of people online using a lot of internet, the understanding of technology, the understanding of how to use the internet, and then all the benefit that comes from that, whether it's social inclusion, whether it's education, whether it's training, whether it's business, will kind of flow from that. And I think the types of jobs and the types of work will increasingly shift to kind of knowledge sector type activities, and that means more money in people's pockets, more value created, and as it will accelerate the Kenyan economy, massively is the hope. Our goal then is to kind of export from what we're doing in Kenya into other countries, and if we can then sort of start a ripple effect and then sort of anchored in Kenya into other African countries and create that same uplift, then it has the potential to really accelerate so many aspects of life across the continent.
Andy, I know that I said that was the last question, but it just occurred to me, maybe there's one or two more things I'd love to hear from you. One would be, during the pandemic, it's now practically 2 years, and we saw that a lot of internet uptake changed in the market. People who never had home internet now have it. E-commerce platforms really so much more adoption. And I think the consumer behavior changed dramatically. And I'm just curious, from your point of view as pointed, do you see any interesting trends as well within uptake, within how you consumers were using your network, the internet access? Did you see any interesting trends that maybe you might want to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think in common with all the internet providers, we saw not just more people wanting to get online, but we saw the existing customers that we had using the internet a lot more. So, we saw almost 50% growth in the amount of data people were consuming. And when maybe it's not a surprise given, lockdowns and the various things that were going on and the closure of schools, but we saw, I guess, people moving to more and more, let's call them value-added activities. There's things that watching TV and watching movies and so on, but we saw a lot of people do online education. We saw more and more people doing trade and business online. I think many of our customers, obviously they're principally a residential service, but many of them use it for some form of business, either through their employment or because of their various businesses and side hustles and so on. I think we saw just a greater level of engagement and probably a greater level of depth of how people are using this, which was great. And I think obviously there's been many negatives about COVID, but I think it's fundamentally accelerated sort of digitization in society. And whilst that's, the whole COVID experience has obviously been very painful for many people in the short term, in the long term, I think this acceleration actually will probably have a long-term benefit for everybody.
Well, I guess that's it, Andy. Thank you so much for your time and indulging us with your story of Pro Internet, your journey here and the future. And we're excited to see what the prospects are going forward with this vision where you really want to bring inclusion to everyone on the internet in Kenya and across the African continent. And wishing you all the best going forward, to you and your team. And once again, thank you very much for being on this podcast. We do appreciate it.
My pleasure, Moses. It's been great to talk to you.